into the dust. Okay, so have you ever witnessed a public fight, like maybe people had too much to drink during a major high-stakes sporting event, for example? Yep, I'm looking at you, Philly, and I really never understood why they feel the need to riot when they actually win, but whatever. Anyway, have you ever seen this kind of public brawl and had the urge to just jump right in? No? Yeah, me neither. But actually, that's just what we're going to do today when we wade right into an ugly academic brouhaha. And I've always wanted to use the word brouhaha.
It was a real melee.
Yeah, real brouhaha.
Because this one did get pretty ugly. You see, this story involves three very legitimate disciplines: ancient DNA, linguistics, and archaeology, but applied to a theory that animated the Nazis. And other than the darkest recesses of the internet, I think most people feel pretty similarly about the Nazis.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
And actually, though little known to the public today, archaeology, or what today we recognize as pseudo-archaeology, was a powerful tool animating Nazi racial mythology. And that caused the academic discipline some major intergenerational trauma, even to an exaggerated extent, in my humble opinion.
I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get
Calm down. Now get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're wanted on the phone.
So let's talk about it. And let me know in the comments section where you stand in this big fight. We're going way back to the Chalcolithic, also known as the Copper Age, and the early Bronze Age, to visit with a people called the Yamnaya. They lived in what is known as the Pontic-Caspian steppe, basically an area between the Black and Caspian Sea, in what is today mostly Russia and Ukraine. And in this region, the Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age corresponds to the years roughly 3300 to 2600 BC, so about 5,000 years ago. If this all sounds familiar, we also visited these people way back in 2024 when we reviewed a study that examined the origins of multiple sclerosis. Just to jog your memory, the Yamnaya were pastoralists who used their wagons and their horses to spread all the way westward into Europe from the Eurasian steppe. And they left behind a rich material legacy, which led archaeologists as well as linguists discover their existence much later. You see, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Otto Schrader hypothesized that the Indo-European languages originated with a people from the steppe region. If you're not familiar, Indo-European languages are approximately 400 languages spoken by nearly half the world's population, from Portugal to India. Now, Schrader was a German philologist, so ancient languages were his thing. And he noticed that Indo-European languages have no common words for camel or donkey.
No one to deride me, but you gotta have three. Stop.
Thus, the original Indo-European language must have originated in an area without those two animals. And voila, that pointed to the Pontic-Caspian steppe, where originally only horses were domesticated. Now, of course, it's a bit more complicated than that, and Schrader drew upon earlier cultural and archaeological research, but that's the basic gist of it. And like the Yamnaya and their wagons, we're off to the races. In the early 1900s, archaeologists like V. Gordon Childe linked archaeological cultures such as the bell beaker and corded ware to migrations of people like the Yamnaya. And later in the 1950s, Maria Gimbutas, a professor at Harvard and UCLA, introduced her Kurgan hypothesis, which looked at these giant grave mounds called kurgans and the artifacts found in and around them, like pottery, weapons, and sometimes wagons. She argued that their dispersion represented the spread of these Indo-European people and elaborated this all in great detail. Make sense? So far, so good? So what's the problem? Well, there are two problems. First, the Nazis took great interest in the Indo-Europeans, who they equated with the Aryan race. and their own archaeology drew upon the works of Gustav Cousinat, whose settlement archaeology was used to define the supposedly historic lands of the Germanic people and as a basis for Nazi land claims. In fact, remember that shaman in Germany I told you about a few weeks back? The Nazis even used her burial to promote their pseudoscientific nonsense, as they passed her off as some kind of an Aryan chieftain. So yeah, all this Nazi stuff kind of discredited the whole idea of an Indo-European people. Secondly, while you can map the spread of a material culture, you can't necessarily tie that to a particular people, much less a language. After all, if it's a pre-literate society and there aren't other witnesses, how do we know what language they spoke? Culture can spread through trade or other forms of cultural exchange, or even be developed independently or through other processes. It doesn't necessarily involve migration or conquest, the replacement of one people with another.
Why are you telling me all this?
It's plot exposition. It has to go somewhere. Anyway.
Because something has come about recently which resolves one of the problems I just described. How can we tie a material culture, particularly in burials, to a specific people? Any guesses? That's right, ancient DNA. And that, in a nutshell, is why ancient DNA is having such a major impact on archaeology.
Help! I'm in a nutshell!
And although it arrived about 25 years too late for Maria Gimbutas, ADNA has shown that these Yamnaya people did spread westward and they brought their material culture with them. But how about the language part? I still don't know how we can definitively tie a material culture and people to a language that nobody wrote down. And that tees up the acrimonious debate around a pair of papers recently published that investigate the origins of the Indo-European people. The first one discusses the mixing of peoples through successive waves of immigration in what is today Ukraine and demonstrates the genetic impact of these movements of people. The second paper, which I'll focus on here, is the one that caused all the controversy. This study looked at the DNA of 435 individuals from dozens of archaeological sites across Eurasia, dating from 6400 to 2000 BC. And it analyzed how the DNA of these Copper Age people spread out to form three distinct subgroups called clines. And that comes from the Greek word meaning lean, highlighting the gradual nature of the genetic drift. In this case, the Copper Age people mixed with the Eastern hunter-gatherers to form the Volga cline, the Ukraine Neolithic hunter-gatherers to form the Dnipro cline, Dnipro like the city in Ukraine, and also with the Caucasus hunter-gatherers to form the Caucasus Lower Volga cline after the river in Russia, known as the CLV cline. This is what it looks like on a map, and you'll notice this other group down here in Anatolia in present-day Turkey. That represents an ancient population that includes, among other people, the Hittites, who we've met before. They were one of the great civilizations that drastically declined during the so-called Bronze Age collapse in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the whole study actually centers around them, believe it or not. And once ancient DNA was applied to their burials, the Hittites posed a unique riddle. They definitely spoke an Indo-European language, as we can see from their cuneiform tablets. However, they are the only people from this time to do so who did not have DNA associated with the Yamnaya people in their genomes. So what gives?
You have questions. I have the answers.
Well, it's this paper that actually suggests the answers. Do you remember that Caucasus Lower Volga or CLV cline representing the Chalcolithic people? Well, they contributed about 80% of the DNA to people buried in Yamnaya contexts, but they also contributed about 10% of the genome of the Anatolians. This suggests that while most of them went westward, a small number went south and mixed with a larger number of the Anatolians. So these CLV folks are the promoters of the original Indo-European language, and the Lower Volga is where it all went down. So that's it. We've got our answer, right? After all, among this paper's many authors are a lot of heavy hitters, namely Josef Lazaridis and David Reich, both of whom are at Harvard and have published widely using ancient DNA, especially Reich, who heads one of the world's leading ancient DNA labs. And with guys like that on board, we're all agreed, right?
Wrong!
Why not? Well, I actually gave the answer away in the beginning in my lengthy exegesis about the Yamnaya people. Well, to review, there are two issues. First, how do we tie an ancient people to a language if they didn't write anything down? And secondly,
Nazis. I hate these guys.
while the overlap between the Indo-European languages and the Yamnaya and the earlier CLV DNA is compelling, it's not definitive. It's a correlation. Although we can date the spread of the CLV DNA by dating the burials that it's found in and also making inferences with fancy calculations, we don't know when that language originated, at what rate it spread, and how it spread. After all, languages can spread through conquest and migration, but they can also spread through other processes like trade, even secondary and tertiary trade, and the movement of people is not always straightforward. For example, we know that Old English came to England from Germanic peoples, but there is a compelling argument that this evolved and then came back to mainland Europe to influence the Frisian language, which is considered a Germanic language. It was not necessarily all one-way movement like we previously thought. And guess what? Culture and style work the same way. It's not all a one-way flow. So, while the various forms of evidence overlap nicely, to state that we have definitively found an Indo-European homeland is premature in my humble opinion, and probably ultimately unknowable. And that's why I think this particular criticism has some merit. As for the second criticism, that we can't talk like this because Nazis talk this way, that's something I take issue with. Yes, the Nazis completely manipulated archaeology to push their own ideology, but the people doing this study are doing so in good faith, not animated by racism. Moreover, somebody's got to say it, but even an archaeologist like Gustav Kosina, who had all the ugly ethno-nationalistic ideologies of his time, made valuable contributions to archaeology. His settlement archaeology paradigm, while ultimately theoretically unsound and oversimplified, did make some valuable contributions in terms of archaeological methodologies. So should we stop using a trowel because Kosina used one? While I eat meat, I recognize that vegetarianism is good for the planet. But do you know who else was a vegetarian? That's right, the Big H himself. So does that make all the nice vegetarians who shop at Whole Foods Nazis? And yes, this headline did get a little cheer from actual white supremacists online. Now, I'm not going to show their tweets, but who really cares? Just like the actual Nazis, today's white supremacists will twist whatever study to meet their own ends. If the study had said there wasn't an Indo-European homeland, then they would say it was just a bunch of Marxist Jewish academics pushing that. So who really cares what they say? My advice to people so concerned with what white supremacists say is to take a little time out from the internet, go outside and touch grass. These folks represent a fringe of a fringe of a fringe, and they should not preclude science from happening. However, just to be clear, I think the claims made by the paper's authors are overblown. While the evidence jives nicely with this idea of an ethnolinguistic homeland, it certainly doesn't prove it, and I'm not even sure it's a claim that's provable. Okay, well that's it. A real archaeological hot topic. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.